Hello, welcome to Magic Find. It's amazing. We're actually doing another episode pretty close back to the last one. Welcome everyone. I'm Ryan, aka Mr. Wendell.
I'm Mason. I'm only really known as Mason.
Your name is Game Array.
That's
That's
the
how
name of
I.
the channel. I don't know if that's
Is Array your last name?
no, it's not my last name. Though the kids call me Mr. Array.
Mr. Array. Anyways, welcome back to Magic Find. Let's talk about what you've been playing, Mason. So, what have you been playing? I know you just told me, but tell me again.
I have been playing through two games. I've been playing through the wonderful game Pyre, which is done by the same guys who did Bastion and Transistor. It's fantastic, and I've also been
Yep.
playing through the newest Everybody's Golf game for the PlayStation 4 Entertainment System.
So, which one have you played more of? Let's talk about that.
Probably Pyre, but I've played. I just got Everybody's Golf like 2 days ago, so I've been kind of playing that more so. Um, but they're both great games. Pyre is such a unique game. Do you know anything about it?
Very little, actually. I get it confused between Transistor and Pyre. Transistor's the one where they sing, and Pyre's the one where I don't know. Tell me about Pyre.
Pyre is actually it's a cross between um, almost like a story-based visual novel and, for lack of a better label, almost like a sports game. So the whole game is based
So
around
it's
these.
like Persona 4 with sports instead of demon hunting.
Kind of, yeah. It's not as expansive as a game as the Persona games are. Like the runtime is about 20 hours, and there just isn't as much to it as the Persona games. But the way the basic game loop works is you play in these rights where you essentially are. It's a 3-on-3 game where you have to score on the other team.
Is it like Blitzball?
Yeah, it's actually the first thing it immediately reminded me of starting it up was Final Fantasy X and Blitzball, and that kind of faded over time, I think, as I got kind of used to what the game was. But it's such a hard game to explain to people what it is, because in addition to it being a sports game when it's like 3-on-3, you unlock or you grow your team as the game goes on. You get new characters, so it almost has like and they level up and unlock new abilities. So it almost has somewhat of a JRPG feel to it as well.
Or an XCOM-y feel?
Yeah, yeah. And then what's really, and this is kind of spoilery, like not too much. Like I personally wouldn't be upset if I found this out before playing it, but some people might. So maybe turn off if you're really against spoilers. But the whole point of the game is you and your fellow players on this team are in kind of a plane of existence that's essentially a prison. At least that's my take on it. And you play in these rights, and you eventually get to what is essentially a championship game. And the reward for winning the championship game is actually one of your teammates gets to go home, gets to leave exile and return to the Commonwealth. And so as you go into these championship games, which are called liberation rights, you actually have to choose which of your players gets to go home and gets to be free. And it's a challenge sometimes because sometimes the characters that are the best players on your team or the characters you enjoy playing with the most are also the players whose story you would like to see resolved and characters that you'd like to see go home and be free. So that decision is really at the heart of Pyre, and it's one of the main reasons why why I keep playing it, because it's an interesting choice I haven't seen in a lot of video games, especially how the really great character work and story kind of connects into the gameplay in a way that isn't that common, I suppose.
Well, you know what they say, if you love someone, you have to set them free, so.
It's a great game, and the art style is fantastic. I actually prefer the art style over Transistor or Bastion.
So what are you doing moment to moment in the game, though, like in the sports ball part of it?
The sports ball. So you can only put the sports ball game. It's 3-on-3. There's two essentially goalposts, where if you get the ball essentially to the goalpost, you do damage against the opposing team's Pyre, and then if you get it down to 0, you win the game. And different characters do more or less damage depending on a certain stat, which is essentially like, kind of like their attack. So if they're slow and bulky, sometimes might be more of a challenge to get them to score, but when they do more damage.
Is it turn-based?
It's not, but you can only control one character at a time, even on defense. So you have to be strategic with how you place your characters. And then also there's a spell attack you can use whether you have the ball or not. Actually, no, you can only use it on defense. That was a lie. But there's a spell attack you can use to actually attack and destroy opposing players, who will then be sent out of the game for a certain amount of time until they return.
Sounds pretty cool.
It's a good game. It's really just unlike anything I've really played before, to be honest. And that's one of the big reasons why I keep going with it. My biggest criticism of it is really, and it's a very minimal one, but I just wish there was more of it. I wish the leveling mechanic was more in depth, or there's like more of there's more complexity to it. It just feels very. You essentially, every so often your character ranks up and you can choose from one of 2 skill trees that only has like 4 upgrades a piece, or 3. I think it's 4.
Sounds very XCOM-y. Like you do the same with your soldiers in XCOM like that, and
yeah.
You lose your soldiers. I mean, there's no way to lose. The interesting thing is that you don't lose your soldiers through failure in this game. It seems like you promote them to freedom, which sounds quite cool.
But yeah, so the level up system is very simple, and there isn't. You never really you never learn new abilities. You just learn very just stat upgrades and that sort of thing. Do
you think they'll release like an expansion which might add more depth?
I don't think they have any plans to. And then the other big thing is, it would be great. Like this game, I've played this. It has a couch co-op, or a couch versus mode where you can play, against a friend, and it's a great time to play 1v1 with a friend. And it's the best time I've had actually like playing the game was against another human being, and but there's no online mode, and the multiplayer is very very bare. It's essentially you go in, you pick some of the players that you have from the game, and then that's it. And I just think that it would have been so much fun if there was like more of a multiplayer mode where you could go in and create your own team, or level up characters as you progress in some sort of like Call of Duty like rank progression in a multiplayer mode.
Yeah, you can kind of see why they didn't, though. I guess they wanted to focus on a single player game, and making multiplayer really work is a huge challenge.
Yeah, I mean that's what it is, and it's totally I think just a limitation of, because they're a pretty small studio, and the fact that they're able to produce these 3 games, which have been all 3 of them have been fantastic, is pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give kudos to them for even adding multiplayer at all in a game that's probably not sold on that premise.
Yeah, exactly.
So the other sports game you've been playing is Minna no Golf, or Everyone's Golf, which is a huge franchise in Japan. It's been like one of the biggest franchises ever since the PlayStation 1 era. It's probably died off now, but it's a really huge game in Japan. But first I've heard of someone overseas playing it.
It's actually kind of insane how few people... Because it was called Hot Shots Golf for a while in America.
That name does sound familiar, maybe.
And people did play Hot Shots Golf.
Okay, maybe
in like the PS2 days. But I hadn't heard of it since then. And one of my friends was, "Hey, are you getting Everybody's Golf? I'd love to play some Everybody's Golf with you." And my initial reaction was, "What the hell is Everybody's Golf?" And it's
is it motion controlled?
No, it's just it's controlled with a controller. It's very simple, simple to learn. Probably
the same golf controls that every other golf game has had.
It's the I haven't played that many golf games.
With the bars where you choose your power.
Yeah, it has the bars, and then you press X 3 times, and then you can use the D-pad to put spin on the ball. But it's fun. It's mindless. it's mindless fun. You know, you don't have to think too hard about it. You still feel like it's at least somewhat challenging. There's a very there's a progression system to it, so you kind of get that, you know, feed that reward loop kind of baked into the experience. And it ends up at a certain point, it ends up feeling almost like a golf RPG more than a sports game, or even like something you know, really family friendly like Mario Kart.
I think RPGs are the way to go for single player sports games. Like the Gran Turismo and Forza series have always been about the RPG of collecting cars and money, and that's what's given them legs.
Yeah,
and just driving around in circles, you know, doesn't. And I think, you know, more sports games should go. I mean, I haven't played a lot of sports games lately, but I mean, I think a lot of them do, especially like FIFA and stuff like that. Like you choose a single character and try and get them through.
Well, the NBA 2K series, when that finally really, and this is like in the mid 2000s, when it finally really started eclipsing EA Sports' NBA Live, was when they introduced, it was called, I think it was called the 24/7 mode at the time. I don't know if they've changed it. But essentially what it was is you took a character, a basketball player, and you started on like the streets and one-on-one games and that sort of thing. And then you kind of just kept growing him up until he was ready to play in the NBA. And then you finally, you know, you work towards getting him drafted on a team. And that's when that series really started to take off. And I think that mode had a huge part of it. I mean, there isn't that much to talk about Everybody's Golf. It's $40. If you enjoy
Sounds
like a
pricey.
I think it's fine. I'm sure it's going to go down in price. There's enough content, I think, right? There's some microtransactions, but they haven't bothered me yet. They might.
Yeah. I'm a super cheapo, though. Like, I always buy games on the sales and stuff, so...
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be $10 in, like, 5 months. But it's, you know, it's just a fun afternoon game. There's nothing... It's exactly what it sounds like.
Are the courses realistic or fantasy, or...?
They're pretty realistic. And then the characters are kind of, like, cartoony, but you can create your own character, and you know... And, the creation options seem to be, you know, acceptable.
Did you make a little mason?
I did make a little mason. I did. It's true.
Yeah. How many games do you make, like, yourself in them?
Not many.
Yeah.
I usually don't at all. Everybody's Golf I did.
Because it's golf, right? You can see yourself playing golf.
Yeah, it's weird that's a weird question, because I feel like the only times I do that are in games that are essentially sports games, or games that like take place in things like where the fantasy is playing a sport that you could potentially actually play. So like I remember like in the Tony Hawk games I made myself, and like if I'm making create a character in a sports game like NBA 2K, I usually try to make him look like myself. But as soon as it's like Dark Souls or Skyrim or an MMO, I throw all that out the window.
Yeah, it just seems too unbelievable that I would actually be able to do anything properly dangerous.
Well, also, in this, I've held this belief since World of Warcraft. I don't see the point in playing in these fantasy worlds and then like playing as a human. Like, be an elf or an orc or something, because you don't get to be an elf or an orc in real life.
Yeah, human's kind of the boring one. I do tend to be human a lot. I don't know, just because it's the default, and
it's always
I know
the most
where I stand,
played race.
Yeah,
in like everything. So
I don't know, it's most relatable, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it's a perfect amount of like fantasy, and because then you can kind of at least like put yourself in the human's shoes, and maybe it's kind of almost like a voyeuristic thing. Like it connects you to your character more.
Did you ever play an Argonian or a Khajiit in Skyrim?
No, I think I played I'm not really that familiar with the races. I think in Skyrim I played is it a Nord?
Yeah, it's basically Scandinavian.
Yeah, so a Scandinavian human. And then in Oblivion, I believe I played a Dark Elf, if those are things.
I think in Oblivion, or maybe, in Oblivion I did actually make myself, and I didn't get very far with that character, but I was happy that I could actually make a character that looked like me, because the faces in Oblivion are so screwed up, I could make myself.
Yeah, and then like Dungeons and Dragons, I don't think I've ever played a human either. I think it's usually like a half orc or an elf or something. Yeah,
in those types of games, I play a human, but I never, like, especially lately, I never play a guy. So I guess that's how I get away from myself and fantasy it up.
Yeah, I almost always main a guy, regardless of what race I play. I don't know why. Never really. Except in Diablo and Path of Exile. Like my main characters, I was a witch in Path of Exile, which is like easily the coolest character in that game because the other ones are also bland, like from a character and lore perspective. And then in Diablo as a female demon hunter.
Anyways, I've been playing virtual reality.
Ooh, tell me more.
For 4 minutes at a time. Haven't bought anything. I'm not willing to buy into VR yet. But I went. My brother came to Japan, and together we went to Shinjuku's VR Zone, which is basically a huge VR theme park / arcade in Tokyo, and so I tried a whole bunch of games in VR, and the reactions you get from everyone the first time. Have you tried VR?
Mm-mm.
No. The reactions
you
get
not an honest.
Yeah, the reactions of everyone who says after they first try VR is like, "Oh, it's so amazing! It's this is going to be the future." I wanted to really like VR, and I played it, and I was like, "Oh, that's okay."
Yeah, that was
all right.
That's I'm trying to think what I know. I've at least like tried, like just not like a game or anything, but just like a VR demo of something, and. But the idea of it, and honestly, I really haven't tried it. But
I expected to like it a lot more than I did.
I don't really expect to go for it, me personally. I don't know.
I think I will, but not yet. But it was interesting. Like the first game we sat down and played was Mario Kart VR, and the control. It just as a game, it wasn't very good. Like. You never have to let go of the accelerator. You just turn the handle and we turn around all the corners. So it was kind of just an experience more than a game. But just that experience of driving, like they're very careful with at the event. They only let you play things for about 4 minutes or 5 minutes because they don't want anyone getting sick, I think. And Mario Kart actually made me feel sick a little bit. I got a little bit queasy towards the end of it. I don't know if that's because I was moving fast or what, but I don't think the games they have there are really optimized for VR very much. Like, you're not supposed to be, in VR, too much mobility is a bad thing. And Mario Kart had, going up jumps and flying down things and stuff like that. So I did get a bit sick.
Here's the thing, like, and I don't know what your opinion is on this, but it almost feels like to me that VR is always going to be better for more of like experience-driven games. Like for the more competitive games or games with like more of a challenge to them, I don't know if they're ever going to work in VR, right? I mean, I don't know what your opinion is, or
I can see them working in a different way. Like the thing that makes VR, the thing that I noticed doing VR there was all these amazing things they had. The Mario Kart where you sit in a car and you got a steering wheel. They had this skiing one where you stand on these skis and move it. They had this winged bicycle one where you had to pedal a bicycle. And all of those were okay, just okay. The thing that I found was the most fun was like in this little tiny corner. They had two little demo stations. One was Tilt Brush, which is the painting one that Google makes. And one was this game where, you got a gun, you have to duck behind cover and you shoot things and you pick up a rocket launcher and you throw grenades. And those two were easily the best experiences at the whole place. Because for the first time in a video game, I could use my hands.
Yeah. Do you think, so going off that, do you think virtual reality could be like the key of arcades being a thing again? Like being
Definitely
popular?
Not.
No?
Definitely not. I think that's what Namco Bandai are betting on. That's why they built this whole thing. They're kind of like, maybe this will be the future. But it's not going to work because they have so many staff there. It's too expensive. Like an arcade works. You build a machine. People can beat on it. They can spill their drinks on it. But they'll keep putting their money into it. And these things are pretty much indestructible. VR needs someone there to babysit you, someone who's pulling a wage in, and it's just not going to be financially viable unless they can make the headsets indestructible, which I don't think they can. And yeah, they had stuff, so that meant they had lines because you can only fit 4 people at a time and have to put it on you and take it off you and blah blah blah. So yeah, VR is never going to work in an arcade where it has to be matched to your body and it has to be cleaned in between people using it. It's never going to work in the arcade. VR is going to have to be in home. So.
The thing with it, though, is, like I said, I can imagine using VR to play through a game like Amnesia or Resident Evil, or pretty much any, like, really atmospheric first-person game. But as soon as... Like, I could never imagine playing a game of Battlefield or Overwatch or even Call of Duty with VR
Those games aren't designed for VR.
Yeah,
the battle
exactly.
game that I played, I can't even remember what it's called. It was designed for VR, so there was all kinds of it was designed for low mobility. So you were in basically in a bunch of sandbags, and you had a rocket launcher over here and a turret gun over there. The turret gun was at least useful to use, but they always are. And you had a helmet and stuff like that, and you could pick up your helmet and put it on. You could pick up grenades and you throw them and it would go where you threw them. You had to load stuff into the rocket launcher before you fired it. Just doing all those things that I've never actually done with my hands in a game before was a really fun thing. And one of the most fun things is people throw grenades at you and you couldn't... What my brother figured out is you can't actually do it, but I can imagine doing fun things like this where you reach up, you catch the grenade and you throw it back. Doing things with your hands like that naturally is what makes VR fun.
Yeah. So maybe I'm thinking about it too narrow-minded, and I'm thinking about how it applies to current game franchises. But maybe the idea is that there should be games built around the idea of VR and that sort of thing. There's
this kind of 1v1, I don't know what it's called either, but there's this kind of 1v1 wizard simulator game that I've seen where you have to draw things in the air and then throw them at your opponent, and you teleport around to dodge things or to move to different locations to get an angle on your opponent. That seems pretty cool, but it's mobility is still the biggest thing with VR, and it's always going to be a thing if people don't have space. But there are ways to build around it, but you need to do it VR. One of the things that surprised me a lot was I thought that one of my fantasies going into VR is I'm going to be able to go see amazing vistas and beautiful unimaginable landscapes, and that all the ones like the skiing one and this winged bicycle one had these amazing landscapes that weren't amazing. And then I wanted to try the one that was the best experience was sitting in this cafe. It sounds stupid, but because when I was looking at the distance, maybe it's because, the screen door effect and low pixels, things in the distance don't look very good anyway. Maybe that's why big giant vistas didn't impress me. But sitting in a cafe with just things that were relatable size felt much more like I was there than anything with a great big grand vista or anything like that. So it's kind of counterintuitive. The things that I imagine would be the best about VR are not the best. And the things that are really down to earth and really relatable as real seems to be what works better in VR.
So was the cafe experience, did that end up being your favorite time with VR? Or
yeah, that was the most realistic, and I could see myself doing things like maybe old point and click adventure games or something like that, where you're getting items and doing stuff and combining items. I think that would work really well in VR. The cafe experience was weird, which is, I'll get into it. I wanted to try PlayStation VR because all the things in the space are Vives, and I wanted to compare it to something else. I wanted to compare it to PlayStation VR, and they had one corner set up with PlayStation VR, but the only game they had was this it has a cafe in it. The only game they had was called Summer Lesson, and it's kind of a really creepy high school dating simulator game.
That's perfect.
And so, yeah, and I was before I got on, there was one guy sitting there, and he's first thing he does is bends his head all the way to the floor, try to look up skirts and all kind of things like that. I just felt that was creeped out, and I didn't want to go into this game, and I didn't want anyone to film me when I was doing it. And I'll go into the game, And then, you go in the cafe or whatever, and then you go and there's a high school girl there, and you're like, don't look at the high school girl. Don't look at the high school girl. Look at everything else. I don't want to be a creep. So that's what I did. I looked at everything else. But just that situation was, like, being in a realistic situation worked so much better than being in all these fantastical, magical places. Just because it felt more real. And the thing about VR is, this selling point is it makes you feel real. Like the other games, like the skiing game and the wing bus was really cool, but seeing those unbelievable magical places felt like I was, just playing a video game on a screen. It didn't feel that great. Sitting just in a real environment that I could relate to felt like I was in another place, or I was, in another world.
No, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah. Also, PlayStation VR, I don't know, I think maybe Vive requires more setup to work properly with you, but PlayStation VR seemed to be much better than Vive, which is not what I've heard from other people, but it seemed to be clearer and work much better than the Vive stuff I tried.
If you were to get one, to use at home, would you go for the Vive or the PlayStation VR?
What I'd want is the PlayStation VR headset on PC. But if someone said I will buy you a VR headset of your choosing now, I would go for Vive because it works with PC and all the games I like, and also it's got the controllers which your hand, which feel a bit more hands. The PlayStation game demo we had only used the PlayStation 3 controller. I know they've got the light things, so maybe that would work better. I don't know, but I would still go for Vive because I'm a PC guy. So. But I would wait until things get better anyway.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm just kind of waiting for the dust to settle on it before I try it out.
Yeah.
But, I'm curious. Just going into it, I don't know. It's just something that doesn't excite me for some reason. I can't get excited about it. I don't know why.
Okay, especially I want it for driving sims. I think it would be awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Although playing Mario Kart and getting a bit sick makes me think maybe not so much.
I would immediately, the games I would play are, like I said, like Amnesia and Resident Evil 7, games like that. I know I know Amnesia doesn't have VR support, but I'm sure there's a game just like Amnesia that does have VR support. Anyway.
Okay, so that's what we've been playing. I've been playing creepy dating simulators.
Look, did you didn't look up the high school girl's skirt, so it wasn't a creepy dating sim for you.
Yeah.
It's the game is what you make it.
Like, to be fair, I'm not against dating simulators. There's nothing against dating simulators, but it's the whole, I don't know, maybe it's just, yeah, anyways. Okay, so maybe we should take a break and get onto a topic when we get back?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, when we get back, we're going to be talking about how cover systems ruined shooters.
So the video we watched, which you actually sent over to me, is about how cover systems have ruined shooters. It's a video by Turbo Button. We'll leave it in the description. The summary is essentially, shooter mechanics, hugely popular in the last console generation, kind of died out recently, I think. But just how limited they are in choices, and how they don't really add that much to the game because, essentially anytime you use a cover mechanic, you really only have a few options. You can scoot left, you can scoot right, or you can pop up and shoot things.
Takes away one of the two sticks on the controller that you've got.
Yeah, it takes away the movement. You can't, when you take that out of the game, it limits the skill ceiling, kind of limits what the available game space to the player and that sort of thing. So what do you overall think of the video? You agree, disagree?
I agree that the cover systems can be boring, especially the way they're implemented in a lot of games. But I disagree that cover systems are always a bad thing. Mm-hmm. He seems to have a real argument against, realism is not a good thing to go for if that reduces fun, and I can see that. But when I was as a teenager, or when I was watching movies like Die Hard, You know, do you remember that scene in Die Hard where Bruce Willis, you know, charges a whole bunch of guys, gets shot a bunch of time, and then just shoots the other guys? Do you remember that? No, because it didn't happen, right?
Yeah.
Because it's kind of, that would be silly and stupid. And, like, you know, but I still, you know, had these, you know, fantasies of, you know, ducking behind cover and, like John McClane and, you know, then running around and, you know, doing a whole bunch of cool shit. So it's, some part of games is kind of fantasy fulfillment, and part of, like, I don't know, my teenage and, you know, war loving fantasy life is like pretending I'm, like, you know, hiding behind cover and popping out and shooting people.
Yeah.
So I can see why it's not as fun to do that in a lot of games, but I can see also why people want to do it.
Here's the thing with me, and this is kind of just my initial reaction to the video. Because he takes a pretty hard stance against it, and, you know, kind of essentially says that the mechanic doesn't have enough room in it to really be interesting, and I don't really disagree with that, but I also think it's kind of, you know, it's weird to say something like that doesn't work when it was in some of the most popular games of the last generation, because, like, obviously, like, something about it was interesting to enough people to make Gears of War such a huge franchise. Something was at least interesting in it enough to make Uncharted what it was, and tons of other games had cover-based mechanics, and it was definitely overused, and it's definitely probably not as interesting as it could be, or maybe not as interesting as if something else was in its place. But to take such a hard stance against it without really examining why it worked for those games, or at least why it worked for the players who played those games, I think is kind of weird.
I can kind of see, like, I actually think Gears of War is a bad game. I played first Gears of War all the way through just because I bought an Xbox and that was the best looking game and I thought it was awesome at the time, but I don't think I had as much fun with the game. I was just having fun with the spectacle.
Yeah. Well, I agree.
Have you ever played Gears of War?
I've played through Gears of War 1 and Gears of War 2, and I think I would agree with that to a large degree. The worst cover-based shooter as far as just implementation of a cover-based mechanic I've played is probably Spec Ops The Line. Because I remember that was very much just literally you go from one, you know, chest-high cover to the next, you pop up and you shoot people and you move on to the next.
So what would be the best game you've played with cover shooting?
I don't know. I don't know if it's ever... I don't know if there's a game I can think of where I was like, oh, that game really nailed the cover-based shooting mechanic. And I know that's kind of going against what I said earlier, but I'm trying to, like, kind of just collect my thoughts on it. And I guess, and because I want to think of it as a way, as from the context of, well, this mechanic, which obviously on the nose and at first glance doesn't seem like a great mechanic when you really dissect it, but at the same time, then why was it so common in so many games? And why were those games, like, those games were popular games? It wasn't, you know what I mean?
I think those games were popular because they sold the military fantasy. Mm-hmm. Like, to some degree, Counter-Strike sells the military fantasy, and so does Call of Duty. I mean, they do it, but, like, when you watch Saving Private Ryan or any of those other films that inspired those kind of, you know, games with cover shooters, you don't see them just running around like they do in those games. You see them taking cover. And that kind of, I want to be a military guy and do that, is kind of what sold, you know, me on it. The best game that I've played with cover shooters was probably Rainbow Six Vegas, which came around, I think, maybe even around the same time as Gears of War. Maybe.
I actually think the first one came out before it, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, that was like, I understand in the video he talks about how cover systems stop mobility, they reduce fun, and I kind of agree with the first part. They do stop mobility, but in Rainbow Six Vegas, I think it gave you enough other stuff to make the game fun. Like, the fun of Rainbow Six is not charging around shooting people, and it's not standing behind something and just waiting for people to pop up and whacking a mole. It's the fun of it was the tactics.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
it was kind of. I think maybe the biggest problem that cover shooters make is they have one character, like maybe Uncharted in the video. I've never played Uncharted, but it's in the video, and things like that. Because when you have one character, you have no tactical.
That's actually a really good point. And I think it's something he touches on in the video about how if you're going to have cover based and you're going to limit your player to having these, just only a handful of choices, then you need something else to kind of fill in that space. Whether it's like tactic commands or, he goes on at length about Vanquish and what Vanquish does and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'll get back to Vanquish a bit later, but I really like Rainbow Six Vegas because in a really fast-paced game with a lot of mobility, you don't have time for that tactical layer to come through. But when you slow things down and when your guy goes up to some cover and there's some enemies behind cover over there, and you need to find a way to advance without taking damage, you send your guys around, and like you can't really have like cover makes things like flanking interesting. Like how can I flank this guy? How can I get around? How can my teammates protect my advance, allow me to advance more? And I think that slowing things down by adding cover, which makes you stop, is a way to introduce a tactical layer to the game and make it more like, even like it makes it kind of like a not XCOM-y kind of tactical game rather than a shooter as much, which I think works.
Yeah.
And I think Rainbow Six Vegas really did that really well, and that's why I enjoyed the game a lot.
It also becomes kind of almost an AI problem at a certain point because you need to have enemies who are smart enough to move out of cover and try to flank you as well. It becomes an AI problem and a level design problem. And if you don't have those two working together, where you don't have levels that are a little bit more open, so there's different angles enemies can come at you, and you need to almost fire at them to kind of keep them in their own cover and stop them from flanking you. And if you don't have enemies who are smart enough to utilize those levels, then you do end up with essentially, what I was talking about in Spec Ops: The Line, where you kind of play from one, very linear hallway to the next, and you just pop out of cover, shoot people, and continue on. It's like the Final Fantasy 13 of cover shooters.
So if Spec Ops had squad mates you could command, though, didn't it?
It did. I don't remember if it's because they never listened or because it never really gave me any sort of real tactical advantage, but I remember playing through that game and never using them. And I forget why. I think it was just they were very simple, if I recall correctly. Like it was essentially like go here and attack. And it comes back to the whole level problem where I think most of the levels in Spec Ops: The Line just did not have enough room for those tactics to really ever come into play in a meaningful enough way.
Yeah.
And it was the same way with in the game sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. In that game they introduce early on using environmental hazards to kind of clear the enemies, and Turbo Button talks about this, but the game drops that like maybe a third of the way into the game, and it very rarely pops up ever again.
I don't know, maybe it was just nostalgia that makes me like Rainbow Six Vegas, but I guess it was the first game that had cover and the first game that made me feel like all those military dreams or military movies I watched, where you would stand behind cover and go and go around stuff.
I just remember playing Gears of War for the first time and just like how you just running from one cover to the next, and that felt so good to me at the time. But I think like anything just really comes down to it. I think just games used it over and over again. It got to the point where the mechanics were very transparent and we started over analyzing what cover shooters were actually doing, and that was that. That was and we just as a community we just grew tired of cover-based shooter mechanics. And I think the problem with it really is that we never, aside from like Vanquish, and very rarely did we ever do anything new with them. Like the mechanic never grew. Gears of War in 2006 played the exact same way as Spec Ops, and whenever that came out, I think it was like 2011 maybe 2010, which really played the same way as the cover-based shooter mechanics in Uncharted 4, which was just a handful of years ago.
Getting back to Vanquish, I don't like it. He mentioned in the video that maybe I'm saying that the way to fix cover shooters is to remove most of the cover shooting, And I kind of agree with that statement. Like I haven't played Vanquish either, but from the looks of it, it seems like the way they by reducing the amount of cover shooting in the game it seems to be the way that that's the way Vanquish did it. Have you played Vanquish?
No, I haven't, which is why I haven't really. I can't talk too much to it.
But it didn't seem like a solution to making cover shooting more interesting. It seemed like a solution to making a game more interesting by removing cover shooting.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's weird because I'm thinking about Uncharted and how, the weird thing about Uncharted is it has its shooting part of it is cover-based shooting, and then the rest of the game just has always felt to me that Uncharted is really two games just kind of mixed up. Like here's the cover-based shooting portion of it, and here's the jumping / like puzzle part of it, and it almost felt like the controls were so separate from one another, from being in cover and jumping around, that the systems, those two parts of the game never felt cohesive to me. And so I'm wondering,
did you enjoy both equally? Or?
Yeah. I mean, I love the Uncharted series. It just always seemed like a weird thing to me because they never felt like they were part of the same game. And so it's...
Maybe because you never did both at the same time? Or
I don't think you did it enough. Every now and then they would try to combine like climbing and you'd have people shooting at you. But it usually only happens like once or twice a game in like a big like... a big set piece moment.
But like variety is a good thing in games. Like there's a whole, like I think there's a video in there somewhere about games which have kind of two different games within them. Like there's how Half-Life 2 broke up shooting sections with puzzle sections to stop the player from getting burnt out.
Yeah, the problem though is when that becomes too predictable, and I think the issue with Uncharted is the level design mimicked whichever portion of the game you were playing. So if you got to a part where you saw some, chest-high walls that you're going to be able to duck behind, oh, well, there's a shooting part coming. But if you come to another part of the game where you see, there's a bunch of different buildings and there's visual cues that you're able to climb on them, well, then this is a climbing section. And those sections they never played with your expectations, and so, or combine them. So you always feel like, oh, this is this section. And then you get to the next section, you're like, oh, well, this is what this is going to be. And it very rarely ever went away from that path.
Feels like very gamey, like this is the level where you do this thing, and this is the level where you do this other thing. It's not as immersive, I guess, that way.
And so, like, part of the problem with cover-based shooters, I think, is just how much the level design needs to cater to those mechanics. And it becomes really predictable, I think.
Perhaps they could solve it in one way, the way XCOM 2 solved kind of camping. Did you ever play the XCOM games?
I played the reboot from a few years ago.
Yeah. Did you notice how that in that game you tended to really camp in Overwatch mode and just wait for enemies to come to you a little bit and progress really slowly?
Yeah, how'd they fix that?
They fixed that by basically adding some bonus things out on the map where it really encouraged you to push, and like you couldn't just sit back. If they put a really cool resource out forward in the middle of the map somewhere, and it said this expires in like 3 or 4 turns or whenever.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it really pushed you forward. Like there was cover to hide behind, but it had a mechanic which would push you forward and bring you out of that comfort zone. And maybe that's what cover shooters need to do more.
Part of it goes back to the whole regenerating health thing, and it'd be interesting to see something like in how the newest Doom game did it, where how you recovered health by killing enemies as they're about to die with a melee attack, which that's always kept you right in front of the enemies and really de-emphasized any sort of like looking for cover. It kept you right in the fight. And I wonder if there's like room for maybe something like that in cover-based shooters.
That's a good idea. I really think that would work to push you out of cover in your most desperate moments. Rather, the traditional way is the grenade, which is just, it's a punitive punishment rather than a reward for pushing forward.
The grenade thing is, I've always thought that was bullshit.
Yeah.
I remember playing through Call of Duty 4 on one of the harder difficulties, and it would just you could be in a closet by yourself, and the game would just spam grenades at your feet because it needed you to move out of cover.
I think it needs to reward, not punish.
Yeah.
Reward you to move forward, not punish you for camping. Which is what XCOM kind of did with that system.
It's interesting. I mean, it's a great video. Just there's something about the idea that cover systems don't have anything to them that I somewhat disagree with, I guess. But I can't think of the exact... I can't think of a way to like word my exact thoughts on the matter, if that makes sense.
I agree with him that they do make things less fun. Reducing mobility is inherently less actiony and less fun. But if you add if you take something away like mobility, you have to add something more.
Yeah,
and, like the tactical layer can be good. Yeah, but I do think that fun is like the military sim kind of thing. Like lots of people play Arma. Arma doesn't have like cover, but it's like one of the slowest, most methodical. You hear a shot, you drop to the ground, and you stay there. You crawl to a tree. But it's fun because of the fantasy.
Well, that's part of it too. And like I said, I think a large part of it is just we've become so used to the mechanic that we've had, like when Gears of War came out and when Rainbow Six Vegas came out, the mechanic was so new that we were so into it that we never really sat down and analyzed what was actually going on. And as the years passed and more cover-based shooters came out, I think it gave us all time to like really think about cover-based shooters from a strategic point and kind of started to realize how bland they can be.
Yeah.
But
the more I think about it, though, the more I think Rainbow Six Vegas did do it really well. I think you didn't have regenerating health, so
that's true.
You had to clear the engagement before you healed. Or maybe it was just like you got shot, you died, you didn't get shot, you were fine. So you had to try a way forward safely, but maybe it still made you camp too much. I can't remember. I should go back and play Rainbow Six Vegas. I have great memories of that game.
I tried playing through Rainbow Six Vegas 2 like a year ago, maybe now, and there were some issues in getting it to run. There was like a sound issue that you have to look into. But aside from that, it plays great. Highly recommend.
Oh, that's one thing I wanted to say. Sorry. I think part of the bigger problem is not the cover shooters, but perhaps hit scan weapons, which I think are fundamentally uninteresting. I
would agree with that. I think hit scan weapons are a lot easier to implement.
Yeah.
And also it's just kind of I think that's what a lot of people are just so used to at this point. But I find them to be less interesting in most cases. And it depends though. If it's a Halo situation where there's a good mix between projectile based and hit scan weapons, and the game is kind of positioning yourself in such a way to avoid this weapon but take this guy out first while you're kind of dodging these projectile. You can use hit scan weapons in an effective way in those kind of games. The problem for me is when the whole game is hit scan weapons, it just gets very boring. And part of it too is also again, like the same thing with the cover-based shooters, when you start to really think about what hit scan weapons are and how that works at a technical level, and you start to overanalyze it, it becomes very it takes a lot of the fun out of the game.
Yeah.
It takes when you feel like there isn't as much skill involved in it, and it just doesn't feel good.
There's just something so fun about calculating trajectories.
Mm-hmm, it's true.
Like in your head. So I don't know. I want to play a game where you're throwing things at other people. This game is all sticky grenades or something like that. I don't know. That would be cool in VR.
Yeah. Or that kind of reminds me of some of the stuff that... Did you play Super Hot when it came out?
No. I guess I'll wait for VR for that one too. But no, I will actually... I have access to it. So, because my friend bought it for me, so it's on the list. Oh, by the way, I've also bought The Witcher 3. So
oh boy, well, you'll need some time off for that one.
Okay, we'll see how we go. I might not boot it up for another 6 months. So.
Yeah, it's just such a huge game. But anyway, before we start wrapping up, we'll leave a link to the Turbo Button video in the description. It really is a fantastic video. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's a bit on the long side. It's like 20 minutes long.
Yeah, it's a good video. Promotes good discussion. I mean, even if you just don't agree with it completely, it makes some really good points that are hard to disagree with.
Yeah, and he in general makes really, really great videos. Him and KG videos are like probably two of my favorites right now.
I like this guy. It's called Gamer Ray.
He's terrible.
I've got bad taste. What can I say?
Him and fucking Mr. Wendell.
Oh, who's that? He's some nobody I never heard of.
Both trash.
Yeah.
The bottom tier of YouTube commentators. So what's your next video on? Are you coming out with something soon?
Yeah, like our last discussion. Thank you very much for an excellent question. Which was what basically I said I got to stop picking on Skyrim, and then you said, well, what does make Skyrim? Why is Skyrim like picked on so much, but so many people love it? And you asked, and that got me thinking about why do I love Skyrim so much when so many of its pieces when so much of it is just bad? And that's my next video, which I'm halfway through doing.
I'm really excited. I think that's going to be a really great video. I'm excited to see it.
I think it'll be divisive because I think maybe the way I play Skyrim is not the way a lot of people play Skyrim.
That's fine though. I mean, don't take me as because I think one of my favorite of your videos is probably I think it's one of your least watched ones. So
yeah,
But I'm sure no one will watch it if I love it.
No, but I'm enjoying making this one because Skyrim's a game I know a lot about because I've put a lot of hours into it, and it's also fun. There's lots of things you can do with Skyrim to make it visually interesting, or at least play with it.
Yeah.
Because Skyrim has a console and cheats and mods, and you can do all kinds of stuff. So I'm enjoying making that.
Yeah. I'm still working on my Final Fantasy 14 video. I'm actually thinking about maybe making something, because I just haven't put anything out in a while. I'm thinking about making something small really quick just to throw out in the world.
Yeah, you said your Final Fantasy 14 video is your most researched video ever.
It's just such a huge game. It has to be.
Is it like last time I spoke to you? You seemed to be focusing on why it was so immersive compared to other MMOs. Are you still going that angle, or are you going just general?
No, I'm going general now. That's going to be a big part of it. I'm going to talk about that because I think it's one of its biggest strengths. But the more and more I played it for that topic, the more and more things I wanted to say about stuff that really didn't relate to it. And, there was a period of time where I was just trying to shoehorn that stuff into somehow talking about, how, it's world building. I've just decided to make a video about it. But what that does is I need to talk about, aspects of the game that I've either never really touched or haven't touched in like a year or two. Mm-hmm. And it's just, even compared to other MMOs, Final Fantasy XIV is just massive. And just there's an entire trading card game inside of Final Fantasy XIV that you can go around.
Is it Triple Triad?
It is Triple Triad.
Oh, I used to love Triple Triad in Final Fantasy VIII.
Yeah, it's great in Final Fantasy XIV, but you can go around and challenge other players or NPCs, and you can win cards, and you can buy other cards to improve your deck, and then you can go on the auction house and see what cards are on there. And it's just this, and that's all inside of an MMO that's already has a hugely extensive set of different mini games and dungeons and raids and all that. It's just
something to be said for variety, like we were talking about earlier.
And then there's chocobo racing, which is exactly what it sounds like if you played Final Fantasy VII.
Is it like Final Fantasy VII? That was terrible in Final Fantasy VII.
Oh, I liked it in Final Fantasy VII.
That was oh god, that was the worst part of the whole game. It's like, just watch this thing and hit the go faster button. Oh, he's getting tired. Okay, slow down. Oh.
I enjoyed it, and then there's all the other stuff.
So please defend chocobo racing. Why is it fun?
Oh, hold on a second. Full disclosure, I haven't played Final Fantasy VII chocobo racing since the earlier mid 2000s, so it could be terrible. I remember liking it.
Okay.
I remember liking the process of getting the gold, breeding the chocobos and getting I don't even remember the racing portion of it. I remember it being kind of crap, But I liked the process of just finding out how to breed the best chocobo, and then finally getting that gold chocobo, and then unlocking that summon. I think it was Knights of the Round. That whole side quest I enjoyed. And it was one of those side quests that it took a lot of time and patience, and you had to figure out a lot of stuff. But then once you finished it, you got like the best spell essentially in the game.
You're describing the reward more than the action.
I don't know. It's memorable. Like I can't think of a single side quest from Skyrim. I literally cannot.
Let's not. We're picking on Skyrim again.
I know. Or I can remember a handful.
How about The Witcher?
I can remember a handful from The Witcher 3, and in Skyrim's defense, I can remember a handful from Skyrim. But a lot of those side quests just feel like the same side quests. Like those side quests could be in Fallout 4. They could be in like any of the Dragon Age games or Mass Effect. Those side quests can go from like game to game. I don't know. There's something just so quintessential Final Fantasy VII about breeding chocobos to unlock Knights of the Round.
Yeah, I mean yeah. I think it's memorable because of how many times you have to sit through a chocobo race.
Yeah, it might be. It might not be a good memorable, but I do remember it. I remember enjoying the process of breeding chocobos. I don't know if it was actually good game design. Might be.
Like, I do agree with you though. I think JRPGs have more variety in the things you do other than the main part, like Triple Triad, like.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Triple Triad, I really loved. I love that there was this whole game throughout the whole game, and everyone played it.
Oh yeah,
and probably like Gwent is the same kind of thing. In
Gwent is very much the same thing in Witcher.
Yeah. And I didn't like Blitzball as much, but
I could never get into Blitzball. I just didn't understand how to play it, and I always lost and got frustrated.
Yeah, the card game was simple and great. Blitzball is complicated and not.
But yeah, and Triple Triad's back in Final Fantasy 14, and it's just as good as it ever was, I think. But we just spent, past 10 minutes talking about the mini games that are in Final Fantasy 14, and that's not even like the game part of the game.
Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to the video. How many pages is the script currently?
It's still in outline form, but it's like 15 pages.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's that's why I'm talking about maybe doing a video in the meantime, because it's gonna be a while until it's done.
I wouldn't have the balls to do something that long.
It came back from that Sunless Sea thing, and I played through Sunless Sea, and it got to the point where I just wasn't enjoying myself playing it. But I still had to because I wanted to finish the script, and I ended up having like 70 hours played in Sunless Sea. And Sunless Sea it's a good game, and I could have played it for like 20 or 30 hours and left with a really great impression of Sunless Sea. But because I played it for like 70 hours, I was so through with that game by the end of it. Final Fantasy XIV, on the other hand, is a game I've, sunk a ton of time in since its release, and something that I would probably be playing regardless. So I'm having much more fun making this video than the Silent Sea video, even though it's going to be much longer, I think.
It's good you got that passion for it. That thing that really works in your favor when you're making videos.
Anyway, well, that's what I'm up to.
Well, thanks for listening, everyone. I don't know how to end it. Please take over hosting duties.
We'll see you guys next time. Hope everyone, if you're in the States, you've probably already celebrated Labor Day. But I hope you had a great weekend. And, yeah. Cool. I'm terrible at this, too. See you guys next time.
See you guys. Bye.